Everything is personal right here. Everything is personal right here.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of Everything is Personal. And today our guest is Phoebe DePree. Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
I was just thinking, maybe this is the wrong moment to even mention this, but I always say, boys and girls, and then I was referring to people as, Miss Phoebe, and then or Mister, or and I've gotten somebody corrected me several times, and so instead of pronouns, I just say the person's name. But maybe the boys and girls thing is also not 2024, right? So it just popped in my head. But
Right.
anyway,
No, that it's interesting. It's interesting. I'm the mother of 3 little girls, and I do say, like, boys and girls, it's time to get going now.
right.
Without thinking. So it is good to be mindful. I
I'm
like
I'm
that.
I'm a father of a almost 20-year-old daughter who goes to Berkeley, and there's this whole woke culture, so I have to be really careful, but not to say certain things. But
Yes.
anyway, let's move into our conversation. We can edit this out. I'm just kidding. We'll keep it. So I want to dive in and ask you, what does cannabis actually mean to you? What has it meant in your life?
Oh man, that's a really good question. So much is the short answer. Um, it's been a part of my life in different fashions since, I was a teenager, really. It started out as a social, means to be social with friends around the campfire, pass a joint around. And then in my 20s, I worked in banking and had a high stress job, and I would consume at the end of the day to relax. And in my 30s, I had 3 babies in a row, and they started sleeping through the night. And then, I wasn't sleeping through the night anymore, and it really helped me to sleep. Now my 40s, I've started this cannabis edibles brand called Goddess Growers. And it is medicine. I always come back to that. And I think it's important to talk about it as a tool in your toolkit, is the way I position what we're trying to do. In my lifetime, cannabis, I described how it's been there for me. When I think, about the effect it can have on me, or the desired end state, it's really to be in the middle, right? So you think about the mind, body, spirit, and it helps to relax my body and calm my mind, so I can kind of be in that spiritual place where you're sort of just in the middle and relaxed.
Yeah. The whole definition of medicine is interesting. Like, we talk about things as medicine. Food is medicine. The
Yeah.
sun is medicine. It's the pharmaceutical definition of medicine is that it went through, or the Western definition, it went through clinical trials, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, has been approved as a treatment for a specific condition that mitigates and expresses possible adverse events. I mean, kale is medicine in that sense, because
Water.
water. I mean, there's no better medicine than that. So I just find this definition to be really interesting. I talk about therapeutic or wellness. We're talking about plants, and thousands of years ago, they used plants as medicine. There was no pharmaceutical industry. And then pharmaceutical industry started using those plants, synthesizing them, creating medicine. But if you really think about the process that we go through in the US, at least, to this, the number one thing the FDA cares about is making sure that no one gets hurt. Or if they do, then you have to list why they got hurt, how they got hurt. And as long as it's less than a certain percentage, you're good to go to the next phase. And next phase is efficacy. But the efficacy, how well it works for somebody, is also has some interesting percentage limitations. Okay, you go through and say, placebo, maybe 25%. works for 50% of the people, harms less than 30% of the people. Okay, now we can scale this out. So, I mean, there's a ton of plant medicines out there that qualify as medicine, but we're not supposed to call them medicine. So I find that fascinating.
I think you were hitting the nail on the head. It is fascinating. And it's also it's exciting. Depending, if I with my rose colored glasses on, I say it's exciting right now because this plant that has the potential to be very therapeutic is finally getting its the respect that it deserves. Now, there is going to be a re-education process, right? Society was told it was bad for a very long time. And so societal perception, you're starting to see that mass change. And I think it'll be for the best, but I don't know. Do you have a feeling about how cannabis, as it becomes more mainstream, and by mainstream, I mean it's being rescheduled, and then eventually, God forbid, we see any sort of safe banking or it kicks to the states. Do you see any change in the pharmaceutical industry for the better or not? How do you think about that?
I'm not sure better or worse. I can tell you my crystal ball, what I feel, what I think will happen, whether it's right or wrong, we can kind of discuss it. But the pharmaceutical industry has been in the cannabis business for many years. So they started in the synthetic THC space with Marinol and all these other products. Then they moved into, the Epidiolex. They finally figured out, okay, well, we can focus on a specific condition, go through a trial, and document black box warnings on products and sell our company for billions of dollars, which they did. GW got sold to Jazz. Jazz is creating other products. So what I believe under the Controlled Substance Act and rescheduling, there will be limitations to the psychoactive component, THC. So THC is the big, 800-pound gorilla, whatever you want to call it, in every single room. Right. It's the one. But how do we know if there are any other ones? Or how do we know there's a combination? Okay, so let's talk about the THC. So these arbitrary numbers were created with really very limited science behind them. Why do we have a 0.3 THC under the Hemp Act? Why? Why not 0.4? Why do they have 0.2? Makes no sense. There is no science behind this. The other thing is 10%. We'll talk about edibles and we'll talk about your company, but this 10% rule. Okay. So I remember in California getting, 100 milligram Corova edible, which was extreme. Okay. Not for everyone. Maybe there is a use for some people, but we came up with this 10 milligram rule. Okay. Why? No idea. Because, from my standpoint, I look at people's genetics and epigenetic expression. Some people do really well with 10. Some people do not do well more than 2. Some people can take 50. It's a personalized experience. So where we get these arbitrary numbers, I don't know. But my feeling on this, there will be a THC threshold. And what I think may happen is the recreational, which I really don't like that terminology, adult use, you're 21 and over, you use it for any purpose you want. It's up to you. It's a therapeutic. So you go out and you get your product from the dispensary. The combustible products, the pharmaceutical industry has a very hard time figuring out how to regulate them. The genie's out of the bottle. No idea. They don't know how do you dose, flower. They really can't figure it out. They've been trying to create these, measured flower vapes and all this other stuff. But we have dispensaries everywhere already. So I don't know how that's going to be controlled. The second part of that is specific formulations. So think of it as a supplement, a nutrient, whatever you want to call it, but specific formulations with X amount of THC. I believe, using my crystal ball, and it could be completely wrong, but I believe that there will be a way to distribute those through pharmacies without a specific treatment protocol, meaning that there are drugs for like Epidiolex. We talked about childhood epilepsy. but there are also over-the-counter medications that support a condition. So this supports your inflammation in your throat. Maybe it may help alleviate your sore throat. Now, you still have to show your ID to get these products to make sure you're 21 and over. So there is a controlled substance part of it, but it doesn't have a specific claim to a disease. So I believe that there will be that level, and then there'll be a specific, drug level where pharmaceutical companies will start developing, as they are already. I know at least 5 different pharmaceutical companies are developing specific drugs for specific conditions, but it'll be years and hundreds of millions of dollars probably to develop those drugs. So that's what I think.
Yeah. Well, and then talk to me about genetic testing, because that's the thing I think is so interesting, is a more tailored individual approach, because it is individual, right? Everybody's endocannabinoid system is unique. People have receptors in different places. It's a neurological relationship, versus a physical one, like alcohol can affect your brainstem. It can make you stop breathing. Cannabis is not going to do that, right? I always talk about it like the volume on the radio in the car. It can turn it way up or way down. It's not going to turn it off. And so I wonder in the future, it seems to me, and especially as a woman, we have in our lifetimes, there's cycles play a role, hormonal changes play a role, and being able to really have a test that, has a more tailored approach. And I know exactly what's going to work for me, because we all know different things work for different people. And that becomes all the more so with cannabis. And then when you start to talk about ratios too, which we should talk about in a minute, the THC does different things when it's in ratio with different cannabinoids. And we're only just beginning to really look at that. And that's also going to be really exciting.
Yeah, I think I took a different approach when we launched EndoDNA. Because everybody was saying, "Oh, I want to find the best cannabis for me that's going to do X." I mean, you have so many different components in the plant that it's really difficult to say, "All right, Phoebe, this is for you. You take this. This is exactly what you should be taking." There's variance in place. So I took an approach to look at, let's mitigate adverse effects first. Let's figure out what things may trigger an adverse effect. So are you prone to stress reactivity and anxiety? Well, guess what? THC is a very narrow therapeutic window. And also there's terpenes associated with that. And you have flavonoids and all those other things. But the ones that we know that actually have a change of effect are the cannabinoids and terpenes and the interaction with them. Individual terpenes work differently than in conjunction with the cannabinoids. So this plant's really interesting. So I know if somebody's prone to stress reactivity and they consume higher amounts of THC with certain terpene profiles, well, based on their epigenetic expression, they may be turning on that stress reactivity and may develop more anxiety. Well, people say, I can't consume cannabis. It makes me stressed. It makes me paranoid. Well, what are you consuming? What are you taking? Cannabis. Well, let's be more specific.
Right,
what do you mean?
It doesn't work
it's
for me.
indica
Right.
or sativa. No, we gotta change that. We have to change that. And it's been a long time. So it's gonna, as you said, it's gonna take a lot of work. So the first thing we need to do is make sure that we put, and I don't know, I can't think of a better terminology, put people in buckets. So this is a bucket that people are more prone to depressive feelings, and maybe they need a little bit of a boost up. That THC is interesting. I mean, the amount that you get with the different cannabinoids and terpenes, that's your therapeutic amount. Now, you take a little bit too much, what happens is, in a lot of people, you have this expression of an anandamide that your immune system may consider like a free radical and may actually attack or overreact to that, because everything it needs to be in balance, homeostasis. So when that happens, you may have other light switches that turn on. So now you have a stressful event that you were trying to address your stress. And you're like, I took this tincture and it made me feel calm. Well, I took this other tincture. I think it's the same thing. And now it triggered my stress level. So I don't understand. Cannabis is not good for me. So, and then you have interactions, but dosing, drug interactions, supplement interactions, and all those things are really important.
With other medication.
Yeah, exactly. Contraindications. But like, so this whole thing of, we have this product that is different from place to place to place. Like, think about it. I can go to a vitamin store and I can buy a multivitamin, and I can buy in Philly or LA. It's the same. I look at the ingredients. Can't do that with cannabis. So until we get our industry regulated, and I'm not a huge proponent of let's regulate, but we have to be able to know that it's consistent and safe. And then we'll get into the effective part of it, I think.
Yes. And, it's really interesting. You touch on a very good point as a brand, because consistency is huge. I want my customer to know that if they're in Chicago and they try my edible, it will quickly make them feel calm. The same way it will if they are in Cleveland and they go into a dispensary and they buy my product. Now, there are different influencers. We try to control all of the inputs, but little things play a big role. Barometric pressure in the kitchen when the gummy's being made, the water, the consistency of the water you're using. Like, I feel like people don't talk about that enough, and all the minerals in there, and then they're interacting, and there's compounds in there. So there's a lot of considerations to make the product as consistent as possible. And then there's some things that are out of your control. So I don't know, like, have you seen anybody that you think is really nailing it on that front? Because we are constantly iterating to talk about how can we make sure all of the imports are controlled, but then also account for environmental differences across different markets.
I haven't seen anybody that's really nailing it per se, especially uh, in in an edible product. There's You're allowed a certain percentage and degree of variance. As long as you keep, there are. I'm going to talk about other brands. It's there are brands
Mhm.
that have a SOP and process that they test really, really well, and they have, good consistent product. It's not easy. I don't know, like when I get a multivitamin in a gummy, does it have the same variance? I have no idea. As long as, your label says it has this much, I don't really look at all the test results from there. What I do see is if it's a soft gel or if it's a tincture and they really, really are consistent on creating that, it has less of a environmental effect. There's less ingredients in there that actually can
Yeah.
interact as an edible. But a lot of people, I seen the funniest thing. I was in a meeting with this doctor, and his doctor's talking about how people don't know how to. He goes, people don't really know how to take tinctures. They put it in their mouth and they swallow. He goes, and he's taking a tincture. He puts it under his tongue, probably waited like 10 seconds, and he starts talking to me. I saw him swallow. I'm like, you just did it. So like people don't, it's not the easiest thing to be able to do. So
Mhm.
and I think having an edible product, it's probably easier for people to consume and get a little more comfortable with it. And as long as you keep it consistent, and you're talking about all the different things that can affect it, but I think there's like, there's a
The big
percentage.
thing. So to your point, I do believe we start with full spectrum CBD, and then making sure you're getting the same strain, get in there, and then backing out the math, right, of what THC is in that full spectrum, obviously less than 0.3%, like we were saying, but then making sure that that is precise each time it's the same. So you're not saying I want 88 to 90% every time I want 88%. Those kinds of things can help. But then when you take it a step farther, just talking about like the water the other day and trying to, okay, can we have the same water across markets? Just little differences. And then the flip side too is educating consumers about, you know, where they are, especially women. I'm interested. I'm a 44-year-old woman, and gummies can make me feel differently, different times of the day, different times of the month, and then
Right.
different times in my lifespan. And
Mhm.
so understanding that, I think, is a conversation that I just want to have all day long. And then to be able to, as a consumer, factor it in, and so you feel like you're making an educated decision. Maybe you need a little more, maybe a little less, and you start to titrate up and down. That's something that I think will be really fun. And that's the barrier to entry that I see with a lot of consumers I speak to, that I say, I've loved, cannabis in place of a glass of wine, for example, at the end of the day to relax.
Yeah.
And uh, many people right now know exactly if they're consuming alcohol, how much they need to get to that need state of relaxation. They don't with cannabis there. So there is like that little bit of a barrier to entry to test a product, try, see how it makes you feel. When are you doing that? I always suggest end of the day when you don't have to be anywhere, you get in bed, you read your book and you try some product.
Yeah. You brought up a couple of interesting points. I really want to dive into your story a little bit more, but I'm so fascinated by this conversation, and people are listening or not listening. It doesn't matter to me. I'm just I'm curious and interested because you brought up some really important things, and I want to emphasize this a little bit more on your hormone health and how important that is. So we have a test called Menopause Biotype, nothing to do with cannabis, but we developed it with Dr. Jennifer Berman, who's one of the top female sexual health doctors in the country. She was on Oprah, Dr. Phil, all that stuff. But it's really interesting because perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, there's hormonal changes that are happening in women, and you have these adverse effects that you may be genetically predisposed to. So as your body's changing and things are changing, your cannabinoid profile may actually be affected by that. Also, your metabolic function. So I'm an ultra rapid metabolizer of CBD.
Totally.
And people are like, man, CBD doesn't work for me. Well, guess what? I take a dropper full, I'm peeing it out. I'm creating expensive urine because I'm metabolizing really rapidly. So I need to know that because other people say, doesn't work for me. Well, how much you take? I took what is the recommended amount? Well, the recommended amount is average, but I'm an ultra rapid metabolizer. You could be a slow metabolizer. So these are the things that we need to consider for personalized experiences. And that hormone test, you look at the optimization of hormones. You look at the personalized supplementation that may be changing in women as they go through, as you were just saying, different cycles,
Yeah.
different age, all these different things. Consider that a supplement. This is the thing that really baffles me. I have like 14, 15 different supplements. I take a probiotic specifically for my gut bacteria. I do all these different things. CBD or cannabinoids are just one of those supplements that I consume. They're specific for me. We have this vilified idea of it, but it doesn't fit that narrative according to some of these other, I'm sure there's some adverse effects if you take way too much vitamin D or too much magnesium as well. Dosing is really important, and it is a very specific experience to individuals. It is a personalized experience.
Yeah. Well, and that this goes back to a more tailored approach to wellness, and understanding I have a genetic predisposition that I'm going to experience hot flashes in my 50s, for example. And I know that. And then if you can turn and say, okay, hot flashes are triggered by anxiety. Cannabis has a great application in the right dose for you for anxiety.
Yeah.
So, women say, well, can it help me with menopause? And I say, well, yes and no. It can help you with triggers that are creating symptoms that are part of menopause, but is it going to stop menopause or change it? No. So, that education for women, I think will be huge. And it thrills me to hear about Dr. Berman's test and for us to understand, because it is 2024 and I have friends who are older and going through menopause, and this should have been around 20 years ago. Like it's kind of like we're playing catch up in my mind, because women shouldn't be like, oh, we're going to just like try a few things and see what works. Yes, there should be a test that tells you exactly based on your genetics, here's what you need, so it does fill up my heart that that's coming now. It also makes me smile that like women just put up with stuff and we make it work, so like it's maybe taking a little longer
It's always taking a little longer with that.
Yeah.
And it exists already. It's there. And I think, going back to one of the earlier topics about pharmaceutical industry and all that. Unfortunately, the way that the pharmaceutical industry is created in the United States is there is insurance reimbursement is a big part of it. And well, when you're dealing with healthcare professionals and you are giving somebody a choice, then the choice is I want something that is FDA approved, that I'm going to get reimbursed for, especially my visit, all this stuff. So when you're doing, other traditional therapeutics or medicine, it falls in the fringes, so to
Yeah.
speak. So hopefully all these different changes going back to rescheduling, maybe people will start looking at it as a therapeutic product and addressing it
And
that
some
way.
coverage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Some
you're absolutely right. But
coverage.
by the way, addressing symptomatic conditions, that's what we develop our test based on. It's symptomatic conditions. Same thing with the menopause biotype test. It's based on symptomatic conditions. So if we can start unraveling and not just grouping everything together and saying, well, what does that mean? Well, I have a predisposition to weight gain. I have a predisposition to stress and anxiety. I have a predisposition to, other mood things or hot flashes. So let's go down the line and address the symptomatic conditions instead of incorporating everything. Oh, well, it's menopause, but it's not. It's just a word. It doesn't mean the same thing for this, for different people. So that's kind of pulling it apart and saying, no, these are my symptoms. My symptoms are completely different. And let's start addressing those.
Yeah, totally.
So going back to your origin story, or starting with,
Yeah.
I'm so glad we jumped into this because I find it fascinating. But I want people to really learn about your journey. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in a town called Newton outside Boston, and I loved it. Rode my bike to my friend's house growing up, and it was a really we were about 20 minutes outside the city, so you could get downtown to Boston, go to the aquarium, go to Red Sox game if you wanted to. Um, I loved it, and then I ended up in New York after college. And I worked in equity research for a few years, and then I worked at a foundation on the alternative assets portfolio, so kind of like in that finance realm. And then, it's sort of I made my way west. I met my husband, and we got married. He's actually from Chicago, and so now we live here.
So going back to your New England roots, your parents were together, you have siblings.
Yeah. So my parents were together, and they, looking back on it, they did a really good job. So I have a brother who's 2 years younger and a sister who's 7 years younger. And we had a very what I would describe as like a structured childhood growing up. A lot of like boundaries. My parents, like I hated it when I was little. I would tell everyone my parents were so strict. And looking back, I think like they always had us under a little bit of stress, but not too much that we, were buried, but enough to flourish. We every summer we would get a job work. It was back, like this is showing my age a little bit, but like you get the newspaper for your summer job and you'd circle, and I've sold encyclopedias one summer. I say that was probably my best job, but really like a loving family that, re- gave us the tools, I guess, to flourish as we were getting older. And I think about it a lot because now I have my little girls and I'm kind of like doing the same thing. And I don't know, man, parenting, I don't know how you feel, but it is like they're the highs, the lows, and
I love
everything
it.
in between.
I love being a dad. I'm a single
Yeah.
dad, and my daughter and I, I think we have a really good relationship. But I try to do as much. I had a different upbringing than you, so I try to do opposite what my parents did. So what do you do here? What would my dad do? Let's do the opposite. He doesn't like that when he listens to it. He doesn't like that at all. I talk to my dad every day now, but we had an
Yeah.
interesting childhood. But I find it, your background, what you just were alluding to. So you were in finance, but you also have an artistic side. I want to dive into that. So as a kid, were you like riding your bike, were you an artistic kid or were you more like into math and science?
So I guess a little bit of both. I was taking like a figure drawing class and I loved to draw, but then I ended up being an econ major.
Right.
And I've always loved math, but I tell people like there's some creativity to that too. And so
Well,
But I love
you were
arts.
in an antique. Correct me if I'm wrong. You were
Yeah.
in, so there's definitely an artistic side
Oh,
to that.
the artistic. Okay, so the antique furniture. Yes.
Yes,
Let me tell you about that.
tell
So,
me.
people are always like, "Wait, you worked in finance and then you were a what? You were a dealer?" So there is like a very straight line of connection in my mind, but it does like need some unpacking to explain. So, I was working in finance at a young age. I should back up. Like when I was 12, I used to get my mom to drive me around to yard sales, and I was super into like collecting stuff. And I would pick one thing and like nerd it out. So, for example, like painted recipe boxes from the Midwest from the 1950s by Chen and Company. Like I went hard on those and like would try and find as many as possible. And then it was like men's leather wallets and Boswell wallets from like the 20s. And so I would, and then horse bus, like just random stuff. And my parents were like, all right, we're just going to ride this wave. Kind of strange. But then as I got older and I was working in finance, I noticed and still had that. And, I just liked old things and collections of them. And I noticed that antique dealers didn't always take into account the time value of money. So, they buy a chair and they think they can make 5 times their money. But maybe like on day 10 of owning it, someone would offer them double their money. And they would say no, because they think, well, I'm going to make 5 times. And they may, but it may be a few years. And when you model that out, they'd be so much better off doubling your money in 10 days and then redeploying it into more inventory. If somebody told you, like in the market, that they would double your money in 10 days, you'd be all over that. So I identified this, I don't want to say problem, but it was a certainly like an opportunity, I thought. And so I went and I took an arts course. I talked to my dad and hemmed and hawed about it, and finally decided I'm gonna try this. And he jokes like I'm the only kid he ever knew that like I was getting like paid less as I got older. But I went out and I started my own business, and I was really proud because I was in the black after 1 year. And what I did is I took the arts class. I got an antique furniture dealer to hire me. And I worked for him for a few years, and then I started my own business, and I was backed by a few antique furniture dealers. I said, look, you're paying to store what you call dead wood, this antique furniture that won't sell, in a storage unit. So you have money locked into furniture you can't sell, and you're paying to store it. Let me take it, and you may take a loss, but I'll get you some cash. And I started doing that with some success. And I had a little model, and I'd go around and drive a truck to shows. And it was the most excellent, satisfying work because I loved, learning about a piece of furniture, writing about it. And then I got to meet people all the time and who also love furniture and tell them about it. So it was a very fulfilling job. But I ended up stopping because and the other thing, I was really, I thought I've got this made. I'm leaving finance. I'm going to, when I'm married and have kids, I'm going to be able to keep working. I won't stop. And then I got pregnant, had a rough first pregnancy, had my baby, really colicky. And I couldn't drive the truck around the country to these shows and have the baby. It just wasn't working. And I couldn't leave the baby. Like it was going to be more money to leave this. So anyway, I ended up stopping, which was like a really, sometimes in life you think, oh, when you're younger, like I'm going to nail this. And then you get swamped in the face. So that's kind of what happened. But I did have this experiencing the arts, but it was always sort of just like looking at it was sort of a merger of material I love and an opportunity that I saw that people weren't taking advantage of.
I don't think you're the only person that makes less income as you get. Well, that's the entrepreneurial journey. Like this is what people don't understand. Like I always think about this whole thing of failure. I never really think about failure. I think about learning experience and then winning and then using that winning to go reinvest and do something else. But all these experiences that you had, I am sure that there's pieces of that experience that you've been able to take in and then be able to leverage into what you're doing and everything that you're doing in the future. Plus, you had fun in it. I used to be a music buyer for Tower Records. I made $7 an hour, and you kids don't know what Tower Records is. The greatest record store ever was.
Ever. It's the coolest job. Whoever's listening to this, it's younger and doesn't know.
It was my favorite thing that I've ever done in my life. And it was great, but I wasn't going to be rich from it, but it was an enriching experience in my life. So you have to be able to take those on. And so go, kind of going into Goddess Growers, how did you even come up with, okay, I want to do this? And you already talked about, you have a connection to the plant, but why did you decide to do that, and why edibles?
Sure. So I love what you say about how you think about failure, because I couldn't agree more. And my story and my foray into cannabis is very much identifies with that. It's, I think, called a growth mindset, right? It's not failure, just being given something. It's a learning experience, and then you do a side step and you move forward and you learn from it. Makes you better, faster, stronger. I've always believed that. So I was at home for a few years with my babies, and we have a cousin who has a vertically integrated dispensary and grow in Colorado. It had a bunch of success. And then I was reading articles about cannabis. Adult use was starting. This is like in, I don't know, October of 2019. And adult use sales were starting in my home state of Illinois that January. And they were going to have a lottery for a tier of license called a craft grower license, which is basically you could cultivate, you could extract, and infuse. So infuse being manufacture. And so I called the cousin and I said, I think you should apply for this license. I'm reading about it, and this is, there's going to be an excess of demand. And limited supply and high barrier to entry. I think it would be a great business model. And you're already doing Colorado when you come here. Well, my cousin's got 4 kids. He's a doctor. And he's like, I don't have time to do that, but you should apply for a license and read the tax act, because not everybody does. So famous last words. I read the tax act and I thought about it and thought about it. And then I ultimately recruited a group of women to apply for this license. And I won't spend too much time on it, because ultimately the process was delayed. COVID happened. Then they still didn't announce. Then they announced we didn't get a license. But with rose-colored glasses on, I say that it actually ended up really benefiting me, these delays, because I stood back and thought, well, what can I do? I'm not frozen here. I don't have a license, so I can't grow cannabis. What else can I do? Well, I could create a brand. Certainly I could create a brand, because I think oftentimes as entrepreneurs, you think about the front end and doing all the work, but really we should be thinking backwards. So what do I want to sell? Why is somebody buying that? And then work backwards from there. Okay. And then what is it packaged in? And what is it? How is it made? And then you get into the manufacturing part. So I ended up creating this brand. I did a bunch of research in the industry. I think that there's an outsized opportunity to look at the woman purchaser. Women are over half of cannabis consumers. But then if you think about us as the head of household, making a majority of health and wellness decisions for our households, for our families, for our extended families, for our aging parents that we disproportionately care for, I thought that's an interesting person. So I spent a couple of years studying the market, interviewing existing consumers, talking to friends that weren't consuming and asking them why. And ultimately, I decided to move forward in the edibles category, mainly because I'm a mom. I mentioned I'm a mom. I've got these 3 little girls. I used to love to grind flour and roll my own joint, but these days there's like far and few between opportunities for me to actually do that. And I wanted something that was a smoker's high and an edible. There's going to be fast acting. I kind of created the product I want to see on the shelf, is what I say, I guess. And so that's kind of how I landed on the edible. It's discreet. I knew I could make it fast acting. We've partnered with Azuka. Have you heard of Azuka?
No.
It's led by a woman named Kim Riel as the CEO. It's just an excellent fast acting ingredient company. All of the ingredients that they're using to put into their product are approved by the FDA. And so I created this edible. I chose the gummy because I want to see that this brand idea, speaking to this woman purchaser, if there's like an overarching theme of this talk, I would say it's shedding a light on women and women's health and women's wellness. Would the brand resonate with a known form? Like if you're on 11 pages of gummies and you choose mine and you liked it, there's something in the messaging, right? And something in my formulation and all of these things. That was why we chose the gummy, is to see, is this idea really going to stand on its own? We right now we're in market in Ohio. You can buy our gummies at Verilife and Curaleaf and Harvest and True Leaf and NAR Reserve, and it's basically the gummy the low dose, the 5 mg, it's an arrangement of cannabinoids. We start with full spectrum CBD, and then we elevated the level of THCV slightly in ratio with the CBD, and then it's a 1-to-1 with the THC, and it's fast acting. So what I think will be interesting in the coming years, and what I believe is offering that entourage effect to consumers offers the best possible outcome to meet you where you are and offer you the relaxation and peace that you receive. The elevated THCV is, I wanted something a daytime. I didn't want to be falling asleep. I don't want to be electrified like 10 cups of coffee, but I don't want to be falling asleep. So that's why we did the THCV. It does have a side effect of being an appetite suppressant. So I do say to bud tenders, like, don't sell this to a cancer patient that's struggling with appetite, for example. That's not for you. But for somebody that just kind of wants to be net zero, because a lot of women tell me that they get the munchies when they consume cannabis. Do you hear that ever?
Oh yeah. I mean, it makes total sense because what happens is when you have that release of anandamide over time, there's a signaling that goes through your vagus nerve and starts creating more ghrelin. And that is what creates an appetite. But if you really go into the science of it, it also adds this feeling of feeling satiated. And what we're craving is, think about it this way. How many people smoke a joint and say, oh man, I want some kale? No, you want fat, you want sugar, and you want salt. So that feeling of feeling satisfied in some way, that's what it's doing. There are studies, limited studies on THCV yet, and we need to really get into that. But if you really go into the old studies, and what I mean by that is talking to old growers, the original like Maui Wowie chemical varieties and the cultivars, they were full of THCV naturally. And if you talk to people that consumed those chemical varieties, they didn't have those munchies. So there is anecdotal evidence to support that, and there's limited scientific
More
evidence.
research is needed.
Yeah, but is needed. But that's where you're absolutely right. People, that's one of the things I hear all the time. You know what? If I can find something that'll help me, not get munchies, I'll consume more because I just go through my whole fridge. I'm like, well, don't have unhealthy snacks. Maybe if that happens, just make better choices. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I love what you said about women making the decisions. That's the research we did. Like in, I don't know, 8,000 or so customers, we started seeing like a 60 or even higher percent of women that are making decisions to get DNA tests for their families, the follow-up, the products. It's definitely, women are controlling a lot more of the market than men. And talking to my dad, I was talking to him about like, health Canada. He goes, I don't know, your mom knows. I'm like, what was your blood sugar? I don't know. He doesn't know. He trusts my mom to everything. I was like, yeah, Dr. May. She's Dr. May. I call her Dr. May.
Totally.
He doesn't know.
Yes.
So it's definitely, it makes total sense.
Oh, I make my husband's dentist appointments. Like everybody, we joke about like the health decisions that you're making, for your family, but I wouldn't want it any other way. I'm not complaining. I always say that I choose to have this and I love it. I love taking care of my family in that way. But what's interesting and where I see the opportunity is, for example, I initially tried to go into Michigan and launch my brand in Michigan. And every manufacturer I talked to said no. And when I would peel the onion away a little more, and I said, well, what is it? It's too niche. It's too niche. Targeting women's too niche. And at first I was really bummed out. I was questioning it. And luckily I've got an amazing management consultant who propelled me along and said, no, don't get run down by the opinion. Just think this is a greenfield opportunity because they don't see it. They don't quite understand how powerful this could possibly be. And they're not appreciating, having a real focus in a brand can actually be extremely positive. But I think people tend to want to say, I want the whole market. I want to sell a gummy to everybody. And, my gummy and this idea of peace and calm, the journey to calm, appeals to many more people than my target customer, because many more people than just a woman who's 44 years old with a few kids suffer from anxiety. So it's not saying that, it's just one person that you're marketing to, but the idea that you're making decisions and you have a focus, I think can be extremely potent. And it'll be interesting to see. I'm making a big bet that there will be some brand allegiance coming in the next decade, as we enter this new phase with cannabis. Right now, you're not really seeing that so much.
Yeah, and I don't know who consulted you about being niche is a negative thing. I used to be a commercial real estate broker for some time in my life, and I remember I had a mentor, and everybody's selling real estate, and I got this gas station listing, and I didn't know anything about gas stations, and I didn't know about environmentals and all that stuff. It was just a difficult sale, and then he said to me, he goes, if you find in real estate, find your niche, find that one thing. So I just became the gas station guy and I found that niche. So yes, and then I expanded through like shopping centers with a gas station, all that stuff. But finding a niche in this industry, I think that's a huge bonus because everybody is selling a product for everything. Oh, we want to be all things to all people. It doesn't work that way. So I agree with you and your consultant who told you go with it, and these people are trying to sell everything to everybody. It's hard to find. You go. I just had an experience with just celebrating my birthday, and I had my friends
Happy
came.
birthday.
Thank you. My friends came. It was amazing. My girlfriend threw a surprise birthday party for me. I had friends from all over the place that flew in. It was just mind
So
blowing. I'm
cool.
still it was super cool. But we stopped. We were walking back from a restaurant, and we stopped by a dispensary, near my house, and everybody was confused. They're not from LA. In LA, it's a little bit more, but there was so much to choose. There's so much confusion. They're talking to bud tenders, and they didn't, we didn't do the DNA test and all that stuff, but they didn't know. They didn't know what should I get, and they were, hey, Len, what do you think I should get? And I have to go and talk to them and talk to the bud tender about what do you want to get and look at the, but it's such a confusing thing for people because it's everything. So having something that's specific, and as you were saying, I forgot you just said something about your goal of what was the journey to
The
calm,
journey to
right? Yes,
calm.
that's what your goal is. That's what your product is supposed to take you on that journey to calm. First of all, focusing on women. Second of all, there is a path. Like you're telling people, I'm not giving you a product to alleviate your pain or support that. You're on a journey to calm. Now, if in that journey you also have some relief from inflammation, great, and that's a bonus. But there's a specific niche there. So I really think that's it's good to have that in this industry.
A focus,
Yeah.
a focus, like you have a tip of your spear, but then you understand that it emanates out incredibly.
So you said you have little kids, right?
Yeah, 11, 9, and 6.
Okay. Would you have a conversation with them about cannabis at some point? Is that something that you were thinking about?
Oh, I mean, they know. Like, if you asked my 6-year-old, she would tell you that I sell gummies with cannabis that help adults feel calm, but it's only for adults. She goes, only adults. So,
That's great.
my whole thing is, like, you can go to the corner into a store and buy alcohol. People have their bars open. I have my cannabis is in a safe. And as it should be. I'm not saying that shouldn't, but I just think that their societal perception is changing right now. And in my small way, I toe the line. People say, "Well, do you talk to your kids about it?" Absolutely. I mean, it's my career. I think the other thing I do is really just towing the line in our community as a woman that is, I'm part of my kids' PTA at school, and we go to church when we wake up on time, and I'm engaged in leading a wholesome life and really happy. And so I think that showing that like, this is a stoner, like if to kind of change that perception that I
Yeah.
consume cannabis all the time. I don't get drunk and consume alcohol. I'm up at 5 a.m. on a Sunday to make pancakes with my daughter. So understanding and modeling that lifestyle as, cannabis can be this wonderful tool in your toolkit. It's not something that's going to be like a fix it all, right? Like it's in addition to a healthy diet and exercise and great relationships and friendships in your life and, a therapist if you need one, all of those things too. But that's kind of the way I think about it and talk about it. And then my kids are extremely relaxed and they tell people. And what I like is that they constantly say cannabis is just for adults. I say that over and over to them. So, that's kind of how they're growing up and what their understanding of it is.
Yeah, and it makes sense. And it's removing that stigma from this whole stoner image that we created. Different publications and movies. It's still there, but you're really helping to change that image because I was talking to a movie producer, and he's like, think about it this way: most people in the Hollywood scene consume cannabis. You go to parties, people are consuming cannabis from like A-list celebrities on down. Let's go out to, the balcony and smoke a joint or whatever, and you'll be surprised on who's supplying who's got the weed. It's just such an interesting thing. But if you look at the movies, they don't reflect that yet. People still come home, pour themselves a glass of wine or a whiskey and drink. How many shows have you seen that somebody comes home and says, you know what? I'm done with the kids. Let me take a gummy. It just they do it in comedies here and there, but it's not something that is normal yet. But I think we're definitely on our way. I was curious. I read something about a food protection and management certification. I was just
Mhm.
curious, what does that entail? What does that get you?
Um, that's more, it was not something I did when I was creating the brand. I used to, when I lived downtown, I helped to serve a meal to people that were experiencing homelessness once a
Okay.
month.
Mhm.
And we would make it in a kitchen at a church. And they needed one of the people who were making the meal, because we were serving it to the public, to get this certification. And it's actually excellent. And I'll go, I don't want to open a can of worms, but I have a lot to say about, we don't have the FDA looking over our shoulder. But you should really be building facility, especially with edibles. You're making something that people are putting in their bodies. So really understanding, the proper, everybody is wearing PPE and understanding, treat it like a food facility that you were going to have the regulator come, and you've got the health department coming in Illinois. So that's really good. But I got that certification for serving this meal, and it's really just understanding about how long you can leave shellfish. It shouldn't go below a certain temperature, and when you receive it, if you work at a restaurant, checking the temperature, and meat, and washing your hands and understanding how long to wash your hands, all that stuff. It's basically just food handling.
Got it. Um, what are some of the biggest challenges that you're sort of experiencing in this cannabis space? Are you seeing that, being a woman is more challenging, or is that sort of, you know, kind of leveled off at this point where we are? And are there other challenges besides like the 280E kind of stuff that
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
everybody in the industry is experiencing?
Yeah. I I would say, being a woman, in the beginning, it was frustrating. I probably would have pointed to it. Right now, if anything, it's been interesting. People really love seeing the brand that it's woman owned. We've got it. We say women owned on the packaging, and I kind of put it on. I didn't really think it was like hold that much weight. People, it's great reaction. So I'll take it. But at the end of the day, I kind of approach it as like people in business, woman, man, anybody. Uh, I would say the rubs right now is we're growing quickly in a market that is turning on adult use.
Yeah.
And so just supply chain management is so huge, and understanding, the time from when I order to when it's actually on the dock, and then planning ahead and making proper forecasts. But that's my bread and butter. I started out in equity research. I love thinking about this. This is like, I stay up into the wee hours trying to model out and understand consumption habits and nerd it out to kind of like make sure that we get just the right amount. So you're not, because you also want to have fresh inventory, right? Like, you've got, an expiry date, it's called 12 months, but you kind of want to sell that inventory pretty fast and make it and sell it within 3 months.
Right.
And so just kind of keeping that, understanding that snowball effect has been sort of my latest, I say challenge, but it's also like a great love.
Yeah, no, it's great. I don't like that as part of my business as a CEO of my company. I really don't. I'm not that guy, so I'm glad I have people around me that helps me. I don't nerd out on that, but I can tell you, you're absolutely right. Having an inventory sit for a long time, it's just not a really good business model. So Phoebe, can you describe your very first experience with cannabis?
Yes, I remember it so vividly. So I grew up in Boston. I had a friend that lived in New Hampshire, and we were all at her mom's house. It was the weekend, and we were around this campfire, and someone was passing a joint around. And I took a drag, and just, that feeling that just washes over you and you just relax in a different way for the first time. And I mean, it's like the rest is history. So it was really like about camaraderie, but then just feeling this degree of peace. And there's other ways you can get there, right? Meditation can get you there, a good exercise, but taking a drag and a joint too.
Yeah, I
What about you? What was your first experience?
Yeah, so my first experience was, I mean, I wrote about this in my book and I talk about it publicly. So I was diagnosed with ADD when I
Mhm.
was a kid. And I'm not the hyperactive. I was just the one that like my windows like on your computer are open in my head. I wasn't paying attention. So I was hanging out early, right before school. I was, I think in eighth grade, if I'm not mistaken. I was hanging out with these kids next to my school and they want to smoke a cigarette. They asked me if I want to smoke a cigarette. I never questioned why they only have one cigarette, but it's one cigarette. So I'm like, yeah, I'm going to be cool, hanging out, smoking a cigarette. So they have a cigarette, they pass around, they get it to me. I took a drag, like didn't taste like I remember a cigarette tasting. So I took another drag, maybe coughed, I don't remember or not, but they were laughing at me. I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, we filled that with weed. And I went back to class and my windows in my head narrowed. And I was like, wow, I was paying attention. And
That's great.
it really, and then from there, I gave up all my prescription meds and I just, cannabis became my go-to medicine for my ADD. So since
That's
I was
excellent.
maybe 14, 15.
Yeah, no, I know.
Around
I'm
there.
like, well, I was not of age when but yeah, I was 16.
Yeah, yeah, that's okay. Um, So a couple music questions for you. Do you remember the first concert that you ever went to? And if so, well, what was it?
Dave Matthews. It was so fun. It was really, I remember it clearly. Um, I had the best time. I wasn't allowed to go for a while, and finally my parents let me, and I went with a few friends. I overconsumed. I think we were like, I don't know, making bad decisions. I think we had like some Jack Daniels in a Poland Springs bottle with a straw,
Yeah, of
but
course.
the music was excellent. What about you? What was your first concert?
Pink Floyd, the Momentary Lapse of Reason tour. I'd say 86. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. The first tour without Roger Waters at JFK Stadium in Philly with 100,000 people. I went with my dad, his brother, my two friends. First time a joint got passed to me coming around. It was the first concert I went. I went some little shows, but it was the first main concert. And I went with my dad. Never, he said, never again. Never went to another concert with me ever again. Or I'm not sure if he ever went to another concert. So, but I've gone to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds since that time.
Oh, us too. My husband and I love music. I will say my husband is the, aficionado. I just like to tag along. And when we were dating, he took my iPod. This is dating myself that I had an iPod, but I had an iPod and it was like track one, track one, track one, track one, track two. And he went through and he named all the songs for me.
Yeah.
And he plays the guitar and it's so sweet. Like when our daughter's like taking a bath, he'll play the guitar for them, or like when they're getting ready for bed. Music is like just the best.
Oh, yeah.
We our favorite, like as a couple, I would say, is Tedeschi Trucks. Do you know
Yeah,
Susan Tedeschi and Derek
of course,
Trucks?
of course.
I just like all day long and twice on Sunday could listen to those guys. Her voice is just like out of this world, amazing.
So what was the last concert that you went to?
The last concert I went to, it was for like it was a oh my gosh, what was their name? It was like there's a place called Space in Evanston, about, just close by where we live, and sometimes they have like pretty big names, and then sometimes they have smaller. This was like a smaller bluegrass band that my husband had found want to go listen to, so we went and listened to them. I'm gonna think of their name in the middle of the night, and I'll email you.
That's cool. All right, another music question. So for the next year, you're listening to only 5 albums, and you don't have to remember the name of the album. You can just say, hey, Dave Matthews or whatever it is. So what would be those 5 albums?
Oh yeah, okay. Whitney Houston, preferably with the song that she like, the Kygo one, Higher Love. I like cannot listen to that enough. Van Morrison. Van Morrison would definitely be on there. Grateful Dead, but don't drill me too much because my husband loves the Grateful Dead. I know less about them, but when I was pregnant with our third, I could not stop listening to the Grateful Dead channel, like on the satellite radio. So we joke about that. Like that probably definitely, I'd love their music. Um, Third, okay. And then I also would probably say Tina Turner, I would throw in there, and Aretha Franklin.
Cool. Nice list. Okay, so final bonus question. Please describe what your room looked like growing up.
Oh, my room. Okay. Um, I had some white walls. There's like these little flowers painted on them, red little like geranium type things. And there's a window, and next to the window there was like a chest of drawers with this little like hamster cage on it, and I had this hamster named Hamlet, beloved little favorite animal. And then there was like a desk in the corner that my grandmother gave me. And I think probably like triggered this obsession with antique furniture, is this like really old wood desk, slant front Queen Anne desk. And that was pretty much it. There was like a little tiny closet in the corner too.
No posters or anything on the walls.
So
You're
here's
not
the thing,
allowed.
like two things. We did not have cable. I didn't watch MTV growing up. Okay. Which like for our generation, like that's saying something. And then I was not allowed to hang the poster on the wall. So my mom had like Museum of Fine Arts, a Monet framed poster on my wall. And then actually I should mention this. I did have like a sampler. Do you know what a sampler is?
No.
In the like early 20th and 19th century, women would they would needlepoint.
Oh, okay.
And my great aunt needle pointed, and oftentimes they do like different verses and sayings, and it was a needlepoint framed above my bed. I would see it every night before I would face it before I went to sleep, and it said, kindness is to do and say the kindest thing in the kindest way.
Oh, that's cool. I like that. Phoebe, where can people find out more about you, about your company, whatever you want to share?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Check us out on our website. We just launched our new website. I'm so proud of it. www.goddessgrowers.com. There's contact info on there. Sign up for our newsletter if you're so inclined. We're going to start producing a lot of interesting educational content. We're not going to, fire off tons of emails. It'll probably be like once a month. But we're trying to build that newsletter organically. So that'd probably be the best way to learn about who we are, about me, contact me. And then you can also check out which dispensaries we're in. We're growing quickly. So.
Yeah, thank you. I love the name, by the way. Goddess Grows great. It's memorable. I love what you're doing. So congratulations on getting to Ohio and hopefully nationwide soon. So really appreciate you being on. Just for my listeners, I just want to say thank you everyone for subscribing. Thank you for the wonderful reviews. Please, if you're listening and if you like what you hear, leave a 5-star review. I'll promise I'll read some of them on my next podcast because I think people really said some really nice things. So I really appreciate it. And thank you. And thank you for being on again. It's great. Appreciate it.
Thank you.